حي على الفلاح.
The main focus of our discussion bi'idhnillahi ta'ala today, extracted from this famous hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam about 7 individuals or 7 types or categories of individuals being under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereby there will be no shade. It is very, very, very abnormal for a Muslim to live an immoral life, which unfortunately today has become a common practice amongst many Muslims, young Muslims especially, who live a life disobedience, corruption, fawahish, illicit behavior, misconduct, and then they return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas, alhamdulillah, for many of our generation, you find it was against the norm for a person to fall into the fawahish, illicit behavior, misconduct that we find, which unfortunately has become common practice. 7 types of individuals will be under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereby there will be no shade. Amongst the 7 individuals that we find, Imamun Adil, the just Imam, the young boy or the young girl who spent their life worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not the end of their life, or an elderly individual, a person gone to the age of 50 or 60, that's normal. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want that. But it's the prime time of one's life. A man whose heart is linked to the masjid. So many people, once again, they come and they say, Salatul Jama'ah, anywhere you can go and pray. Possibly true. So what's the point in building the masjid then? Give the glad tidings of individuals who are walking in the night, in the depths of the night. What is the depths of the night? Salatul Fajr and Salatul Isha. They're still coming towards the masjid. That's a sign of Iman. A sign of hypocrisy is what? The person drags themselves to come for Salatul Fajr, doesn't want to pray Salatul Fajr, or doesn't want to come for Salatul Isha inside the masjid. That's an element of hypocrisy. Read the life of the Sahaba. If one of them missed Salatul Jama'ah, they would hide and then secretly go hide in the crevices and secretly go and pray. And that's they used to conclude. Anybody who missed Salatul Jama'ah, either they were traveling or they were severely ill. And you know, as a side point, even the munafiqun never miss prayer behind who? Behind the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, lest they be spotted. And what do we do today? We don't care much about it. Every day we miss Fajr bil Jama'ati. It's not that important. Miss Isha bil Jama'ati doesn't mean much. What do you mean it doesn't mean much? That is a sign of Iman. That's a sign of the pillar of Islam, of devotion. Successful are the individuals, those pious individuals who are submissive inside their prayers, those who guard their prayers, preserve their prayers. First thing the person will ask about the Day of Judgment will be their prayers. So if we're not really bothered about it, we find it trivial, we find it something petty, or what's this got to do with the impact of the rising of the Muslim Ummah, or whatever it may be, then you can see that there will be no rising. Likewise, just to complete the hadith that we find, 2 individuals who come together for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they separate upon that. They haven't come together because of wealth, or property, or fame, or friendship upon this dunya. They've come for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they separate upon that. That's the only reason why they meet and they are together. Thus you find that this bond, that sometimes the Islamic brotherhood makes a stronger link between oneself and another individual, even than your own blood brother. That's what Iman does. Indeed, believers are brothers towards one another than even your own, indeed, blood relatives and your ties that we all have. Once again, concerning a young individual, that a beautiful woman of lineage, of honor, of dignity, and likewise could be the opposite, the woman could be tempted as well. And what does the person say? I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is another individual or that category that will be under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereby there will be no shade. Person who hides the giving of their charity, giving of their wealth, that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand has spent. And 7thly, we find a person who remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with sincerity, all in his own or on her own, and the person begins to need to shed tears, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hadith in the Sahihain of Imam Bukhari and Muslim. These are the 7 different types of individuals or the categories. Imam Ibn Abdul Barr al-Andalusi, he mentions the best book or the best hadith on fada'il, on virtues, is this one hadith. That's one of the ulama. He wrote 2 complete volumes, each volume some 500 pages, and the essence is this one hadith. And what do these individuals share? They all share of breaking their desires. Each one of them breaks their desires to gain it. Imam Adil, why a just Imam? Because most of what we find around us, are they just? Are they fair? So a just Imam is very rare, because a person knows that when I'm in power and control the Sultan, he can do whatever he wants to do. But the just Imam does what? He breaks his desires, because he's doing it for who? Lillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's Imam Adil, the just Imam, will be one under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise you find Shabun, who grows up in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is breaking what? The desires. As we began with, every young individual has desires. If a person says, I don't have desires, there must be something wrong with them. Likewise the one who's spending his wealth is breaking desire. The person loves wealth. You're never going to attain piety till you don't spend on the things that you love. So all these individuals are sharing that element of breaking their desires and moving away from their desires, so they can come under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise you find that in general, all of us will be asked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about our life, about our wealth, about our knowledge, and even more so what will happen regarding when we were young, what did we do with our young days? Indeed, I've seen that doing actions whilst a young individual is strength, is power, is dignity. Just like the sun. In the beginning of the sun, going past the meridian, is the peak time of its life. And as it begins to descend and it begins to come down, it begins to, the time just before Maghrib that we find, it's still classified as the sun, but it's weak. The most powerful time of the sun is right in the middle. And likewise, the powerful time of a young individual is when the sun is rising at its powerful point. That is when the young individual strives in serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, other individuals are mentioned, and you find that the young individual, the human being, is like a tree. And thus you find that a tree, towards the end of its life, it loses its fruits, loses its benefits. There may be some trees that give fawaid at a later stage at the end of their life, but the general sunnah of ashjar is there a certain peak time that it gives its fruits. Then after that, it just becomes wood. So when is the tree life of the human being? The tree life of the human being is when it gives its fruits, it gives the blossom, it gives the benefits, is when the person is young. After that, you still could be a tree, but you are an empty tree. We need to go back, look at the role of those individuals who came before us, those who responded to the call of Allah and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Who were most of those individuals? If you look carefully, they were young individuals. Likewise you look at Surah Al-Kahf, what do we find? That those young individuals, they were young boys, young men, who believed in their Lord, and we did what? We increased them in guidance. Likewise, you read the tafsir of Surah Al-Buruj. What do you find? The main theme, talking about who? The boy and the king. One boy, a young individual, devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that makes what happens, what takes place? A whole empire crumbles. Likewise, we mentioned, look at the masses of the companions, read through their lives. Mu'adh bin Jabal, young boy, is classified as what? The most knowledgeable regarding halal and haram. Likewise, you find Abdullah bin Abbas, young individual, classified as what? The one who explained the Quran, because the Prophet Muhammad placed his mantle, his cloak over him and prayed for him, give him deep understanding of the deen and give him deep understanding regarding the Quran. These are the companions. Usama bin Zayd, the age of not more than being 20, the final expedition of the Prophet Muhammad, he places who? Usama bin Zayd as the leader of the whole of the army. So even some of the elderly companions begin to think, how is that possible? A young boy, how can the Prophet Muhammad place Usama bin Zayd in that position? The Prophet Muhammad passes away from his dunya, so maybe that's an opportunity to change, place somebody more experienced there. What does Abu Bakr do? Guess what? He keeps Usama bin Zayd. Because if he's been chosen by the Prophet Muhammad, there's no need to remove him, irrespective of his age. But it must be wisdom. Likewise, you find many individuals, they think that maybe the companions don't know about a good life. They don't know about the modern world of dressing well, looking well, enjoying this dunya. Read the life of Mus'ab ibn Umayr. Read about his life, how he used to dress, his silk garments, his perfume used to come from Yemen. If you walk past in the marketplace in Mecca, everybody knew. That's the life that he lived. But then when he became a Muslim, and you find that what happens, the companions, when they go to bury him, and they find that there's a cloth, when they cover his head, his feet begin to show. When they cover his feet, his head begins to show. And some of them begin to weep and think, this is the same Mus'ab ibn Umayr who wore the best garments, who wore the best clothing, and today we cannot even cover his body today. Many of the companions, they wept. And as you find the companions, this isn't history, this is the reality. Barefooted individuals, ripped clothing, you know what they did? They conquered this earth. That's what they did. Because why? Because that iman and that faith that they had. And that's that Islam, the blessing of Islam was the greatest thing that they discovered. Al-Hassan wal-Hussein, classified as what? The two young individuals, the leaders in paradise. Likewise, read the life of other young individuals. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz has been classified as the fifth Khalifa. Read about his life. You find Imam Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani, Imam al-Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad. Read about their life. Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, Imam Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Read through their life. Young individuals, how they were devoted towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Read the life of Imam al-Nawawi. At the age of 10, whilst the children were telling him to come outside and play, he used to cry. He didn't want to play with the kids. Have patience and commitment and devotion like the five blessed Anbiya, beginning with Nuh alayhi salam, and then Musa and Ibrahim wa Isa wa Nabiyyuna Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Remain committed. Read about the life of these individuals. Ibrahim alayhi salam, read about his life. A young boy who challenged the idols, who spoke out against his people. And as they said that, indeed we've heard about a young boy who's done this to our idols, speaking ill of our idols. Bring this young boy in front of us. I remain committed. Nuh alayhi salam, talking to his people for how long? 950 years. Oh my Lord, I call my people day and night, in public, in secret. Every time I call them, they thrust their fingers in their ears, they took their garments and they placed it over their heads. That's how rude the people were. But what did Nuh alayhi salam do? He bared that. He carried on that journey. Isa alayhi salam, what they attributed to him, that you are the son of a woman who committed adultery. He bore that, carried on his journey. And that's when he praised his mother, that she was a pure woman. And likewise, most amongst them who's in difficulties, Musa alayhi salam, and then you find the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they all persevered in their life. Our young individuals can't care less what's taking place in the world. As long as we get our fish and chips and whatever it may be and enjoy our life, that's what that concerns us. I'm trying to highlight at the end of the day, if you want to gain lofty goals, it's taken 150 years to dismantle our people and to break it all apart. So it's going to be a very long journey to build the bridge once again. The future will always be bright with what? With the youth. If the Shabab become corrupt, then that is the downfall of this Muslim Ummah.